great. So now what? He goes, listen, learn to laugh, have more fun, make mistakes, and enjoy yourself. And that's what I'm doing. And I was able to do that by reaching out to, my team, my men that I work with, and to, kind of talk myself through this danger zone.
What are the other 2 questions? You said that there was 4 questions that have got you through a lot of things.
So the 4 questions are, so when you get that feeling where you're hunching forward, right? The first question is, what am I believing? So our beliefs drive our behavior creates our environments. We need to be very careful about what we're believing, especially in a moment like that, right? So the first question is, what am I believing? Very often it's come back in some iteration of I'm not enough, right? I mean, whatever iteration that could be, maybe I'm not smart enough. Maybe I didn't go to Harvard. Maybe, doesn't matter. It's the whole thing. It'll come back in some way or another. According to the really interesting thing about beliefs is that they have to be reinforced somehow. So you have, an experience, which is the feeling you're having, and then you have to reinforce it. So you're the only one that can reinforce it. It has to be reinforced by somebody in a position of authority. So if you're biased by yourself, then you are that authority. And so you have to ask yourself the next question number 2, which is, how am I reinforcing this belief system? Like, what am I doing or not doing that's making me feel that I am not enough? And you'll get an answer to that, right? What am I doing or not doing? Question number 3 is, what would I prefer to believe? Like, what is that preference? Rather than what should I believe, what would I prefer to believe? And, in my vocabulary at that point was, I would prefer to believe that I got this. Like, it's good. It's going to be fine. He's probably not going to murder me. I don't think he has a, missile that will hit my house. So I think we're going to be okay. And then what do I need to do to reinforce this new idea, this new belief system? So when you go back to question number 2, we ask, like, what am I doing or not doing? Very often the answer to question number 4, which is, what do I need to do to reinforce this new belief system? It's usually the opposite of whatever it was in question 2. So it's like, I'm timid about the show. It's just to admit that I'm timid about the show. And it's a powerful exercise. I mean, I get to connect with you over it, which, and to tell you, like, this has been like I've been excited all week. But when you have this idea in your head that you're not enough, that excitement very quickly can turn on you into anxiety.
Yeah, dude, so fascinating. I really appreciate that. You mentioned a couple of times already today, boundaries, setting boundaries. How do you come to think about that? What is it that people are getting wrong when it comes to it? How can they be useful? What's the process? Give me boundaries 101, the best and the worst.
Okay. So the first misconception about boundaries, is that they're about other people. So boundaries are about how you show up in the world. They have nothing to do with anyone else. They are delineators for what you accept and not accept, what you'll tolerate and not tolerate. And so a boundary doesn't sound like, hey, don't say that to me, it makes me mad. A boundary sounds like, I have a value system that is around this. Then how you communicate that is different. So, for instance, I tend to spend my time only with people that value kindness. If you are an unkind person, you have no space in my life. So when someone is being unkind, I will generally say, hey, I don't appreciate the way that this is happening right now. I'm going to leave the situation. That's how you enforce a boundary, right? So your boundaries are actually based on your value systems. That's kind of the most important misconceptions, that like it's a rule book. Boundaries are not a rule book. The other one I hear a lot of is boundaries are about putting yourself first. And that's horseshit. Boundaries are about making your needs equal to everyone around you. So rather than saying, I'm putting myself first, I have to be selfish. Well, no, you don't have to do any of that. You have to define yourself in equality, which is, okay, my needs are as important as everyone else's. And then you can make decisions based on that data, right? So if, for instance, you want to go out for tacos and somebody else wants to go out for pizza, this is not a boundary, right? But if, one of the things I see a lot with people who've gotten sober is, you'll get a phone call and it's my least favorite question of all time. Well, there's going to be drinking at the party. Is it okay if I drink? Why am I in charge of that? So my boundary around this is I am not in charge of other adults' decisions. That's a boundary. Like, I am not in charge of other adults' decisions. That doesn't sound like anybody's got a rule to bend, does it? Like, that's me. I am not in charge of that. So when they call me and say, is it okay if I drink? I say, I am not in charge of other adults' decisions. What you choose to do, you choose to do. If what you are choosing to do makes you feel uncomfortable, I would suggest you not do that. But I'm not in charge of that decision. Right? Boundaries at work are very, very often something, I get this brought up a lot. It's like, well, how do I tell my boss I'm not going to do that? Well, you just say no, and that's it. Like, I unfortunately, my workload is such, and I have a boundary around personal time with my family, so I won't be able to come in this week or this weekend, whatever the thing is, right? So those are the two most common misconceptions. When you start to understand that, you start to develop what looks like more like a bill of rights than a list of boundaries.
For the Anglosphere people, explain what a bill of rights is in this context, please.
So a bill of rights is a list. How do I explain this? I actually do this in Boundary Boot Camp, which is funny because I explain it like shit every single time. But a bill of rights is a list of values and priorities that you hold yourself to. So, for instance, I'm allowed to ask for what I want is within my bill of rights. I'm allowed to have conversations during sex is in my bill of rights. I'm allowed to laugh at inappropriate jokes. I'm allowed to make inappropriate jokes. I'm allowed to have an opinion. I'm allowed to like pizza. It's a weird one, but it's in there for me because at some point in my life, I was married to a woman who was gluten-free and for some reason or I was not allowed to like the things that I like. I'm allowed to, so when you think of the Bill of Rights, it's, you can also put in there things you don't have to do. I do not have to tolerate unkindness, right? I have a boundary around yelling. I don't believe that that's a proper way to communicate. So in my Bill of Rights is I do not tolerate yelling in conversation. And how does that show up if I enforce it? Which is, I would just simply say, hey, raising your voice with me is not an option. So we're going to take a break from this. I'll come back to it in 15 minutes when both of us have calmed down. And that's it. Like, it's not like, it's just, this is what's going to happen. So that Bill of Rights really shows up, and it's unfortunate because it sounds a lot like affirmations, like, and one of your good friends, who is a coach to me that doesn't know he's a coach to me, is Alex Ramosi. He's the sphere of personal growth has been so awesome because I have coaches that don't know they're my coaches. And he mentioned at one point, I think it was on your show, he said, confidence is not about shouting affirmations at yourself in the mirror. So this is sort of in that vein. So it's, going against one of my own, heroes, but
it feels much more operational though. Most of these aren't things that you're saying in the whimsical hope that they're somehow going to manifest one day. They're guidelines. They're guidelines that you've put on the floor. And you say, hey, if you kick one of these tripwires, then if I don't know where the tripwires are, if I don't know what they are, and if I haven't sort of made a commitment in advance, then I'm always going to negotiate with myself about whether or not that is a tripwire or not. And, in the moment, trying to come up with any sort of a solution. I used to have this thing, fuck, this is old. God, this might be 10 years old now. I used to have this thing about how it's basically impossible to come up with a solution when you're in the midst of the crisis. And if I told you if I told you in a week's time that I was going to push you into some quicksand, you could spend the next week on ChatGPT looking at the best strategy and what shoes you'd need to wear, and am I supposed to move? I sort of do this lateral sort of shaking thing, or it's called the Hoffler movement or some shit for getting out of quicksand. But if I just push you in some quicksand and I'm like, hey, fucking try and get ChatGPT out now, it's not going to happen. You can't think laterally, and yeah, another Hormoziism. He says 20 minutes of preparation adds 20 IQ points. I get the sense that with this, it's a much more protracted version. You're much further out in advance. You're creating these operating principles. And yeah, maybe it is kind of lame in a way to be like, oh my God, like you need to write out this list of rules about how to do things. And you go, yeah, I'm in many ways phenomenal and fantastic and competent, and in a ton of other ways kind of useless, and this is me compensating for my uselessness. This is a solution for me to work around that, and it helps me to mitigate the parts of me that I don't want to keep manifesting. They're these, like if you thought about how you wanted to redirect a river. You have a river and it's moving and it's sort of carving and it's eating away at the outer edge of each turn. It's like chopping away at this thing. You're like, I need to redirect it in this way. It's going to take a fucking ton of effort when you first start. You're going to take an absolute ton of effort. But when it begins to find that thing easier than the other thing, that's when you move from system 2 to system 1 thinking, right? And that's the whole process. You start off in the deliberate and then you move into the automatic. So yeah,
I explain that really in detail to a lot of people, which is, there's 4 levels of learning, which is, you start out as unconsciously incompetent. You don't know what you don't know. You move into the conscious competence realm where you do know now what you don't know. And at that point, you have to make a choice. Do I give a shit to learn how to do what I don't know how to do? And you then become consciously competent, where you go, okay, I have to practice this until it's a thing. And at one point you become unconsciously competent, where it's, we call those people naturals. Like for instance, you are a natural podcaster. I watched your very first stuff. It was good. It's not this good, right? If you go back to my original videos, I looked like a monkey fucking a football. I was terrified. I was shirtless in Panama. I thought I was going to be in men's work. The captions were all wrong. It was filmed sideways. Like, disaster.
Everyone's got an origin story,
right?
I came across this quote the other day that I thought was really interesting. I wanted to bring up to you to do with boundaries. It says, "Don't try to fix people; just set boundaries." I've been kind of transfixed by that idea for quite a while. It is a damning indictment about how poorly most people can change, and some people can. Some people can make genuine, like hard left turns or right turns in their life. But I think kind of meeting people where they're at and just assuming that the person that's showing up in front of you right now is the person that they are. Sure, maybe they're drunk or whatever. Maybe this is they had a really, really hard day, or their dog died yesterday or something like that. Okay, like sure. People have over, a couple of sample points, you do 2-3 sample points, you go, okay, I know who you are. And is it really realistic for you to expect this person who, you can't stop thinking about the shape of their eyes or the smell of their hair or the way that they walk or whatever it is, and you're not falling in love with that person. You're falling in love with the idea of what you could craft them into if only they were able to be sufficiently malleable. And I think don't try to fix people, just set boundaries is a really lovely redress to those of us that are maybe like hopeful romantics in that way, or hopeless romantics. And this happens with friendships. This happens with family too. And I imagine don't try to fix people, just set boundaries probably resonates at least a bit with some of the work you do.
I think so. The other thing I tend to say is that when somebody shows you who they are, just believe them. Like,
oh, that's great.
It's really simple. Like if somebody shows you who they are, believe them. It's the easiest way to, it's the easiest way to negate narcissism. If somebody shows up and we talk a lot of, in the personal growth world or not even personal growth, but, just TikTok and Instagram and all the places that I, admire myself, tend to get all the red flag commentary, right? Well, this is a red flag and that's a red flag. I'll tell you what a real red flag is. The fact that you ignore red flags. And if you are boundaried enough, if you understand your Bill of Rights, if you understand who you are, then when somebody shows up in the world that violates that, despite how manipulative they can be, or whether they have narcissistic personality disorder, or whether, they have sociopathy or whatever, you won't tolerate it. And so, yeah, I do agree with that statement. I agree with that a lot. I just think go ahead.
No, I'm really interested in, you have this sort of moment where you've maybe got your operating principles, your Bill of Rights. I imagine that this is a task that you should sit down,
Sure.
really focus on writing it out physically. What I'm interested in is the habits or routines that you recommend for maintaining those boundaries, because it's all well and good saying, it's the equivalent of the 1st of January, the day after you've written the Bill of Rights. My diet's going to be on point. I'm going to sleep 8 hours a night, and Sam Harris's waking up app's just going to get fist fucked into oblivion. I'm going to do it every hour of the day. But
I've got an alarm for everything.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
Talk to me about the way that people can stay resilient in their boundary setting, the habits, the routines for sort of maintaining that over time, for getting back to it if they feel like they've sort of fallen off.
So I do that in a variety of ways. I hesitate to answer it because there's so many prescriptive ways of living these days that, everybody's telling me I have to be up at 4 a.m. and I've got to bathe my nuts in olive oil, and then I've got to sun my asshole, and then I got to get into an ice bath, and then after that I have to get into a sauna. Right? I've got to go to a sauna after this, and then, once I do that, then I can start my day. And but I think put it somewhere you see it. One of the things I do with people is just say, take your top 3 that you want to make sure you focus on, put them on a business card, like go get a blank business card, put it on that business card, handwrite it, then take it and laminate it. And then you have it. Right. And it's just kind of a reminder. It's in your wallet. It's in your pocket. It's about, another Hermosiism is, most people don't need to be taught. They need to be reminded. So once I've taught you, I've taught you. The other way you can do this is getting involved with other people that are doing this. So, my community is a great example of this. I have an incredible group of humans that are all in there, and, they get a text message from me like every other day that says, hey, stop that. Whatever you're doing that you shouldn't be doing, stop doing that or do that. Right. But the most important thing, I think, Chris, is just read it. If you read every day or you get up and you have kind of a morning routine, it doesn't have to be, you don't need to spend 25 minutes meditating on it. You don't need to, have a long conversation with yourself in the mirror. You don't need to write, I love you in lipstick and then a heart around your head and, all that nonsense. You just read it once a day, as you go. And I learned that actually, one of my favorite stories about myself, I'm about to, speaking of filleting myself, is I was fortunate enough to be coached one-on-one by Zig Ziglar at one point in my life, which if you don't know who he is, you seemingly do. He's, probably the first most important sales trainer ever. And I had called him in a sales slump when I was 19 years old. I just called him on the phone and never thought I'd hear from him. But 6 weeks later, he called me back. And he sent me this little thing on his website, and it was this, it's like this long paragraph, and it was like, here's what I'm going to do today. And it wasn't like affirming. It wasn't like I'm good enough and I'm smart enough and gosh darn it, people like me. It was, here's how I intend to show up. And he said at the bottom, I'll never forget the quote, the eyes are the windows to the soul, so be careful what you look at. And this was the first thing I read every day for like 4 years. And, my sales kept climbing, and he checked in on me about every 6 months, and, really kind dude. I'd love to tell you that story some other time, but, that's really where I figured that out, is that I just read it. I read mine every day, and I revamp mine about every 6 months. So I go back and revisit it, make sure that the things I'm working on are, that I haven't mastered them. It's this mindfulness moment that why would I need to continue to be mindful about something that I've already mastered that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So I'll take things off that list. And that's another concept, is that, boundaries aren't static. They're evolving, just like you. Who you are is not a fixed concept. It's ever evolving. It's always changing. And that means your needs will change. It means your boundaries will change. What you'll tolerate, what you're willing to tolerate will change. And I think if you give yourself time enough to grow into that, and you can really experience a very cool life. So that's how I would say to do that in terms of, tactically speaking, is just read it every day. Once you do it, read it every day.
I've been a huge fan of Post-it notes over the last year, like the most 1930s fucking technology to fix things that I need to remember. Just little bits, I'm a big fan of mantras because I think they're sort of like the WinZip, file sort of compression of entire ideas, and just popping things around is a really nice way to do it. So I'm all in for the laminating of the business card. Getting into I guess what I think we maybe haven't fully covered yet, that's probably one of the biggest sticking points, is the felt sense when you need to do a thing, when you need to enforce a boundary, when you need to say no, when you need to sit in that moment. It's happening. The discussion is occurring, whatever is about to go on. How can sensitive people become more assertive?
There's two things on that. I was actually going to bring this up way early in the call and I forgot about it. So I'm really glad you came back to this. The first thing is, very often boundary conversations don't need to happen in the moment. There seems to be this concept that you have to immediately defend yourself, but acids and bases mix about as well as emotions and logic. So if you are in a potentially emotional situation, it's best to buy time. Now, that's not to say to be conflict avoidant, because that is kind of a core competency of the people pleasers, to just avoid conflict until it goes away. But it's about conflict deferment. So, and maybe that's an hour, maybe that's a day, maybe it's after Thanksgiving dinner, maybe drunk Uncle Eddie needs to go home, like whatever. But so that's the first thing. It's like, if you are somebody that's highly sensitive, don't hold yourself to the standard that you're going to be, Johnny on the spot with your boundaries, especially in the beginning. You have to give yourself time to adjust to this new way of being. So, and the way you do that is you just say, okay, hey, I'm getting uncomfortable. I'm going to take a break for this conversation. It's a great way to do that. Or, hey, I've asked that we don't talk about that, so I'm just going to step away, or whatever. Usually, especially in family situations, it's generally around conversation. The second thing you can do is, when you notice you're feeling that hunched feeling, is just to breathe. So when you get that sense that you're being overcome, I've been a martial artist most of my life. You're probably familiar with the term ki, which means spirit yell. I can't just scream hi-ya in the middle of family dinner, but what I can do is take a very, very deep breath in and hard out, and that generally will help me reset my nervous system. So it's like in all the way, and then like really hard through, so I get all that carbon out of my body and just let that out. And then that will actually cause my skin to heat up. And you can see it. I actually got flushed when I did it. So that will cause my skin to heat up, cause the emotion in my body to kind of dissipate, go other places, and to balance out. And then I can say, okay, hey, that's not okay. I'm an extremely sensitive person. It may not show up that way online, because, I'm sort of a firebranded preacher of everything that says, you can do it. You just don't believe you can. But in, genuinely speaking, I'm pretty impacted by other people, or I wouldn't do this. So that's how I do it, is one good solid breath that nobody even has to know I had, will help me reset. And I can then decide, kind of make the idea of, okay, do I want to even address this now?
Yeah. What about, just to add a additional layer of complexity, there's certain times where you just don't have any other choice. You need to address this situation in the moment. Mm-hmm. This isn't necessarily about a boundary. This is somebody asking you a decision. Are we going to do this, or are we going to do this? And you have to have that moment of self-inquiry. You need to try and tap into your desires. You need to be able to advocate for your needs. I'm going to guess that this mindfulness gap, facilitated by what's contemporarily known as the Huberman breath, is a good stop. Is there any other tools for assertiveness when kind of under pressure like that?
There are, but I will not allow Andrew Huberman to take over the ki.
Okay.
You can tell him I said so. Hope
you can take the breath name back if you give us some more tactics.
Right, sure. So if you're truly in a moment. So number one, speaking of another person that's a coach that doesn't know they're my coach, Tim Ferriss, says that there's no such thing as an emergency. And I fully agree with that sentiment. There's almost no reason we need a decision right now unless it's life or death. So if somebody's pushing on something and you're uncomfortable, the answer is it needs to be a default of no. Now that's really hard. So that there's two things that you have to remember in those moments. The first thing is no feeling is permanent, and they're almost never fatal. So no feeling is fatal, no feeling is permanent. So if it's not fatal and it's not forever, you can get past it. This is where I was really challenged. I used to believe that I wasn't courageous. And I used to believe that I wasn't brave. And I believed those things because I was afraid. Those two things can't exist without me being afraid. That's just a Tuesday. You become courageous through action. You become brave through action. And bravery is defined as going anyway, right? So at some point, you have to realize that it's okay that you're afraid. It's okay that your shoulders hunch forward. It's okay that your eyes well up and you don't know what to do. It's okay that you're overwhelmed. It's okay you have butterflies in your stomach. It's okay that your jaw is clenched up and you just want to fight. That's all okay. And if you can just remember that it's okay, and without it, you cannot be courageous. You can never call yourself brave if you're not afraid. Then you can immediately start to rewire the thought in your head. It's like, first, when I feel afraid, what does it mean? I'm afraid. That's all it means. It doesn't mean anything. It just means I'm afraid. Right? Am I going to die? Probably not. The 2 seconds between a decision and the words make a big difference. So, in the game of no that we talked about earlier, I say you have 90 seconds. Like, you give them 90 seconds. You only really need 2. Really, you only need 2. So if somebody is really pressuring you or somebody's really pushing on a boundary, give yourself 2 seconds. 2 seconds. 1, 2. And then speak. Whatever comes out. Whatever comes out. It can be anger. It can be vitriol. It can be sunshine and rainbows. It can be an I love you. It's a great way to diffuse a boundary conversation, by the way. Just I love you. Try that. If you want a good one, just I love you. It screws up the whole room, right? So that's what I would say is give yourself 2 seconds and then speak whatever comes to your mouth. And it's going to be scary and you're going to feel it, right? And so I think what I heard you ask me and tell me if it's true is like, how do I get over the feeling? You don't. You don't. You go anyway.
What about the guilt that people will feel when choosing themselves over others? The fact that there's this person there and I have this sense of obligation, this sort of, I'm so used to subjugating me below everybody else. I'm going to feel like I need to deal with being disliked. Maybe they're not going to like me. What if they don't like me? I feel guilty. I've chosen myself over this other person.
Sure.
I think that's probably quite a visceral emotion that people pleasers feel.
Yeah, I mentioned it earlier. Like if you think of the first time you were going to kiss your wife, you're married, right?
No.
You married? No, I thought you were married for some reason. If you think of the first time you were going to kiss your girlfriend or anybody, and then you think of the first time you thought you were going to die, the feelings are identical, right? So the question is, are you guilty or are you excited? Are you feeling guilty because you're not choosing them? Or are you feeling excited because you finally chose you? So there's a big reframe there that can happen. Without getting into the platitudes of like, feelings and all that crap that you can say about, you'll get over it. actually, no, fuck it. Let's just do the platitudes. You're going to get over it. Like, it'll be fine. You're going to feel guilty, man. It's like you weren't good at tying your shoes in the beginning either. For the first 3 years of your life, you shit your pants, but you're able to get over the discomfort of learning how to not shit your pants and how to tie your shoes. So if you can get over the discomfort of not shitting your pants and learning how to tie your shoes, and there's a good to fair chance you can get over the discomfort of saying no. And so it's this immersion in the idea that you are not for everyone. And I lived my life the opposite forever. So I think it's something I'm really passionate about is, you're going to feel guilty. You're going to feel uncomfortable, right? Is it guilt or is it just discomfort? That's the next question. It's like, are you guilty? Like, are you sitting there going, this person's really going to be sad? Probably not. So if you're truly believing that, are you engaged in a form of hubris? That would be my next question is like, how important do you think your no is? And I ask people that all the time and in exactly the same way is like, how important really are you? Like, are you really that important that if you say no, I don't want to go to lunch with you, they're going to go outside and, stick a fire hose from the tailpipe into the window? Probably not. I think they're going to be okay. They'll have a margarita by themselves. Right. And so I think there's a self-importance. This is where people pleasing and narcissism tend to bump up against each other a lot. It's like your no is about as meaningless as your yes because you never say no. So when you say no, nobody believes you. And when you say yes, less and less people are believing you because you're so overcommitted you can't show up. It's this weird, it's this weird paradox where like, when you've said yes to everything, your no becomes meaningless and your yes becomes less than meaningless. So when you start saying no to things, you're going to be uncomfortable. Everyone else is probably just going to be surprised. And let them be surprised.
Does life get easier or harder when you stop people pleasing?
Yes. Yes. Initially, it gets, and it's not, I suppose it depends on how you do it. But if you do it the way I did it, it was initially, much harder because you go through, people pleasing is a very lonely way to live. It's a very lonely way to live. Because you constantly feel like you're in a transaction with everybody around you. And you never really know what your value is to other people. And you start to think, okay, I really don't have any friends. So you kind of feel lonely. But then when you start to prioritize yourself as equal to other people, those people start to leave your life. And then you're like, well, now I'm so lonely. But you were lonely anyway.
I don't even have my fake friends anymore.
Right. Now I don't even have the bartender that said that they liked me. Right. It's the same thing as when I quit drinking. I had all these friends. But when you drank the way that I did, you start to realize that those friends you were just a joke. You were a paycheck and a joke. And, very often the people that will exit your life, when you start to do this work, two things will happen. Either they'll go and they'll stay gone. But more often they circle back. I had a friend, we were watching football the other day and he said, I really like this version of you better. And he was the first one that ever said that to me. And I hadn't seen him in years. And it was just a really cool moment for me where I really felt something like he likes this version of me better. And it was when I told him, no, I don't want a shot. I don't want to do that. Like, I'm a recovered alcoholic. I can have a beer from here time to time, but like, I don't want to sit and do shots with you. That's a dangerous road for me. And I said, no, I'm good. I don't do that anymore. He goes, man, I really like this version of you better. What a cool thing. But that's been a 5-year timeline, right? So it's not unlike starting a business. You go through this from the moment you change to, what one might consider to be the end result. You're going to experience a pretty high level of loneliness in between those 2 points. Because you're not healthy enough for the new folks, and you're way too healthy. Like, so even having one boundary can make you too healthy for everyone around you. That profound when you're like deep in that people pleasing well is, one boundary will make people start to turn on you. Like, hey, I don't want to go to your birthday party. Why? Because I don't want to. That's it. I don't want to. Because I value my time and I spend it with my family on Sundays. It could be any number of damn things, right? But that one boundary can really like set the tone. It's like in the fighting, in the parlance of fighting, like if I jab you in the face, I've now set the tone. We know who's in control, right? And when you take control, other people aren't going to like it. So you immediately start to see people exit stage left, and you're looking ahead, you don't see a lot, right? You see an empty wilderness. And the encouragement I would give people, some of the most beautiful, growth-filled, exciting times of my life was when I was the most lonely. Because loneliness presents with it a massive amount of freedom. Like, I could do what I wanted, when I wanted, had to answer to nobody, had nowhere to be, nothing to do. Like, my options were limitless. I ate when I wanted, I shit when I wanted, I went to movies by myself, and so initially it will get worse. Worse is a weird way of saying it. I think initially it will get different and uncomfortable. But you're already uncomfortable, right? I get a lot of people that, whether it's on my channel or in my groups or whatever, they'll say, well, if I do this, then, let's pretend you have a narcissistic person. By the way, I hate that term. I also hate the term manifestation. We can do that on another time, but let's pretend, well, my narcissistic whatever is not going to like that. Okay. Well, they're mad at you anyway. So who gives a shit? Like, if they're going to be mad, whether you do or whether you don't, you may as well do. So if your life is going to suck, whether you do or whether you don't, you may as well do. And if it has to be done sooner or later, it may as well be done sooner. So let's just do the thing and feel better about ourselves. And will it initially suck? Yes. Will you immediately feel better? Without sounding like a guarantee? Mostly yes. Because, your confidence, for me, my confidence was shot until I started making commitments to myself and showing up for those. It didn't matter how much money I made. It didn't matter. It didn't matter who my friends were. I thought it did. And it didn't matter what car I drove, and it didn't matter on what floor of the high rise I lived on. What mattered was the minute I started saying, I'm going to show up for me, and I would delineate exactly how I was going to do that, and then I would do it, I started to think, okay, well, maybe I'm okay. And when I start to think, okay, well, maybe if I'm okay, maybe I'm better than okay. Well, maybe I am kind of smart. Maybe I'm not a fucking idiot. Maybe I can start a business. Maybe I can travel the world for 2.5 years. I did that like a crazy person. And, at 40, by the way, don't ever do that at 40. It's fun, but I aged myself a lot. And maybe I can ask that girl out. Maybe I can ask that guy out. Maybe I can, and I think that's what shows up when kind of in the medium term is like, maybe I can. And then, so it goes from like, oh, fuck, I'm lonely, to like, maybe I can. And then it's like, oh shit, I really can. And then your life just starts to, skyrocket, and you start to feel good about yourself, and you start to wonder, and then you hit a wall. And that'll happen, because you'll make a new friend, or you'll make a new ally, and they'll turn out to be a piece of shit. It's common along this journey, because you start to get a little full of yourself, and then you get knocked back down a little bit, and you make a course correction. And then, slowly but surely you start to find out that people love you for you, not because of what you do.
Yeah. James, my business partner in Newtonic, sat on a rock, took a ton of psilocybin in Australia, and asked himself the question, do people love me for who I am or for what I do? And it was a I think, a difficult question for him to answer because, the tougher question that he didn't actually get around to asking, but a friend gave me was, well, does the world love me for who I am or for what I do? What about you? Do you love you for who you are or for what you do? And then you realize, you realize that you're asking the world to love you for who you are. Meanwhile, your love is contingent on how you've shown up that day. You're right. So you're asking the world to treat you in a manner that you're not even prepared to treat yourself in. And, this is a good part of the foundation of self-worth. That imagine that you had a friend and every time that you invited them out to lunch or to a party or something, they said that they were going to come, but they arrived an hour late or they didn't show up at all. After a while, you'd stop trusting they were going to do anything.
Right.
Well, you are that friend to yourself. You sort of have an intention, and then your ability to deliver on that is your self-trust. And if you always say that you're going to get up on time, but you hit the snooze button 3 times, you say that you're not going to eat the cookie or break your diet, but you continually do. You say you're going to go to the gym. You say you're not going to lie to your partner, and all of these things continue to be broken. It's like, well, where is the faith that you should be drawing from? What's the well of evidence that you should be drawing from to have any proof that you can do this? That there isn't any. So one of the other words that sort of we've danced around a little bit today are triggers and sort of the role of triggers. What is that? How do they sort of factor into this?
This will probably get me canceled. I know it's a safe space. I want to answer that, but I want to also say your business partner is also one of those coaches that doesn't know he's my coach. In fact, you can thank him. You can thank him for my sound quality today because I went and bought this just for you.
He's got a racist accent. Don't listen to him. Racist accent.
So, your triggers are your responsibility.
What does that mean? What are triggers? Define them for me.
So, I struggle with this because I think I tend to not be great in psychological terminology. And I'm going to get shit on for it, but whatever. So in my experience, I come from a lot of childhood trauma, and when I was triggered, I would have a visceral emotional reaction within my body. It would bring me back to a state of deep fear and anxiety. That is what a post-traumatic stress disorder trigger sounds like. So, and it could be auditory, it could be hallucinogenic, it can really be an experience where somebody will say something, you'll have a smell, you'll feel a feeling, something will occur, somebody will yell at me, and it could fire my mind off. I've done a ton of work, on post-traumatic stress disorder within myself. I'm not an expert in the field, but I think where we've gotten is the conflation between triggers and negative emotion. And that's what I mean by that. It's like somebody who's legitimately triggered, if that's a thing for you, you need to speak to somebody in the psychological field. If you are having a visceral, overwhelming reaction to external stimuli, then that's a bigger problem than I'm prepared to address. It's the conflation between, there's two things. There's a conflation between triggers and negative emotion, and the other conflation is between trauma and adversity. When I say your triggers are your responsibility, I mean, just somebody making you feel uncomfortable is not you being triggered. And if it is, that is your responsibility. Even in the sense that I was talking about with my own post-traumatic stress disorder, that was still my responsibility. So dealing with that level of trigger is different. Dealing with the I'm uncomfortable trigger, or, I don't like it when you do that thing trigger. How do you deal with it is you grow up. Life is not required to tiptoe around you. And I think we've beaten that horse to death and manifested our way into this idea of that everybody is supposed to be everything to us all the time. And it's not sustainable and it's not realistic. So I'm not sure I answered your question there so much as I gave you a soundbite that's probably going to get me punched in the face on the streets of Denver. But whatever.
Well, I'm interested. That's true, but you and me both. I'm interested in the capacity to give up on people. That working out when you should actually give up. How you know when someone has gone too far. You mentioned earlier on when somebody shows themselves to you, believe them. I think the noble part of some people pleasing is you will maybe give somebody a chance when nobody else would. And
sure.
That's like very upward aiming. Every underdog movie in history has got some young street urchin that gets, the coach sees in him the fire that nobody else can and gives him a chance, even though he's going to throw it in his face a couple of times, blah, blah. But some people take it too far. So how have you come to think about this capacity to give up on people?
I think there's almost an epidemic of no contact in the world right now. So I think giving up on people is happening a little too quickly. So I'm really glad you asked that. I think the no contact narrative is... So first, not everybody that bumps up against a boundary is a narcissist. Not everybody who doesn't understand this new way of you showing up is toxic. So I want to just start by saying that. But when somebody... It's really, it's so nuanced, and I hate that word too, because it's the new excuse for, I don't want to hear what you have to say. You said it on another one of these, that nuance is the new N word. I almost passed out. I laughed so hard. So, I was driving. I almost locked up the brakes in my car, but I've only gone no contact or cut 3 people out of my life. And they weren't small people. So one of which was my father. I talked to him once in 9 years and then once on his deathbed. That was it. I've not talked to my sister since 2015. Or no, I'm sorry, 2009. I have not spoken to her and I probably will never again. And then one other person was an ex. Malevolence is unmistakable. And I think that's all I have to say about that. It's that malevolence is unmistakable. When you see it, run, don't walk.
Thinking about, again, not just where people are when they're at the beginning of their journey, but as they sort of continue to go on, continuing to hold boundaries, continuing to make progress, managing that lonely chapter thing in the middle, managing the pullbacks, the price corrections that bring them back down and then put them back up. I'm interested about what happens when people are a little bit further along in life. You mentioned, I think, the sort of avatar client that you work with is sort of like a 48-year-old guy who's very successful at whatever it is that he does,
Sure.
but has been wildly unsuccessful at ever advocating for himself.
Mm-hmm.
What additional complications come along for somebody who's trying to do this, who's trying to sort of enter into this world when they've got financial resources or when they've got some reputation or some status or some acclaim? Does that make it easier or does it make it harder?
I don't know if it's more or less. I think it's, it might have been Mark Manson that said it, that, a homeless person and Elon Musk both have money problems. The challenges it presents when you've become a highly successful people pleaser are probably more challenging to overcome because there's more at stake. And your belief system, as I mentioned this earlier, is, beliefs drive behavior, behavior creates environment. but beliefs are built through reinforcement. So you've spent 20 years reinforcing this people pleasing as a way of living, and you then have convinced yourself that if I don't make everyone happy, I'm going to go broke. Right? If I don't, and so in the highly successful people pleasers, that's where we start to see that burnout component is, well, fuck, I'm just an ATM machine. And I think it's more challenging in the way that you have to literally redefine your relationship with probably the two highest value things in your life, which are your family and money. And to devalue money is probably the top priority. And that's really hard. I really like money. I like making lots of money. I like spending money. I like going out to nice dinners. Like, I'm a dude who likes stuff, and I don't like stuff, but I like experiences, and they're usually not cheap. And, so that's the benefit in it, of course, is that you can then prioritize things that you actually like, but your relationship with money has to change. And, I think it was on your show that Jordan Peterson said, about getting sober, that you have to change everything. You have to change who you hang out with. You have to change, your entire social strata. You have, all of it has to change. And that's very true with the people pleaser. Now that I think about it, it's probably more challenging. It requires a lot less. It requires a lot more resources and a lot more time because you have a lot more invested in it. The cool thing, though, with the highly successful variety. So my clients between, 35 and 55, making $250,000 plus a year. When the habit breaks, it usually breaks for good. And it's like a moment, it's a moment of clarity. So with people that are not quite at that level, that are kind of moving up, my 28-year-olds that are doing okay, but they're not where they want to be yet. Right. They tend to take a little longer for some reason or another. But with a 35 to 55, 65, whatever year old, when they recognize the pattern, and it's always one little thing, it'll be a technique that I show them, or, learning how to say no, and it's just over. And then everything changes all at once. And it's not a change that, it's not like a toxic variety of it either. I never really thought about that, Chris, but it's really not. It's usually just, okay, well, I'm going to do this now. And everybody around them goes, okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, there's a self-assuredness that prestige sort of brings along with it. It's weird because I suppose people that have managed to reach some type of acclaim or renown or whatever, reputation within their family, within their industry, whatever it is, people kind of have faith that they know what they're doing. So say, hey, you managed to get us here so far. You're the captain of the ship, or the sous chef, or whatever. Right. We'll continue to follow you. And that faith is, even if it's come from a place that's been compelled and not well balanced and not fully integrated and not alchemized and all the rest of the stuff, but it's been effective. And you go, well, look, right, we followed Nick into battle a good bit, and he didn't really steer us wrong there. So I reckon we just kind of follow. So, the proof is in the pudding, so to speak. And if Nick thinks that the new direction is to take a hard right, then so be it. And we'll go and do it. So I wonder whether, there are more ingrained habits for you to overcome, and there's maybe a little bit more to risk, but also you've got more ballast on the ship. You've got more status, you've got more financial resources.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think that's a great way of saying it, is you got more ballast on the ship, which is a short way of saying that you've got more support. Something I would really want people to know listening to this is people do love you. They do. They just don't know how. And so when you change, especially if you're in that kind of higher status, or if I'm going to be you or James status position. Look at me, I'm learning. they have more to lose than you do. So I think there's a component to that of selfishness within your social strata as well.
Absolutely.
Like,
people need to keep you happy.
Right. Like, if you're miserable, and I had a really great CEO that was in London. We never did end up working together, but I really love him and I hope we get a chance to someday. But, he has that kind of really big persona, that really big social strata. And, I don't think he knows how easy this is going to be. Because everybody loves him, right? And he's everything to everybody. Most people in your life that love you don't want you to live like this. They really don't. They benefit from it. Everybody in your life, if you're really in that people pleaser mindset, if you really do live that way, everybody in your life either benefits directly or indirectly from the behavior. I promise. Right. Mm-hmm. But if you believe like I do, that the meaning of life is love and adventure, and honesty is what adventure is. If you want to have an adventurous life, just be honest. Then being honest with the people that you love will only make them love you more. And the reason, it's like this. I heard this analogy about Velcro, that the only reason Velcro works is because it's imperfect. And because that's what catches the Velcro. That's what catches the loops, is the imperfections. And if you really want people to love you, be you. And watch how they change, and be grateful for who they are, and love them even when they're afraid of you. And don't back down. Life is so much better than we make it. It's like, I have never been in a position that I am more grateful for who I am than I am now. And it's not because of status, and it's not because of wealth, and it's not because of any of the, extrinsic motivators that people might have. It's, I fell in love with the person I am. And I just kind of let people come and go as they need to. And because I get to do that, I get to have things like boundaries, but I also get to have great sex. I also get to have amazing dinners. I also get to laugh with people like you. I get to meet friends that I never thought I'd meet. So one of my coaches, his name is Stone. I told him I'd mention his name on this podcast. He was 17 when I hired him to teach me how to do TikTok. He was $32. And about a year ago, I had posted on my wall that I wanted to come on your show. And I told all my following to tag you. And I don't know if they did or not, but I was like, I really want to go on the show. I really want to meet this guy. And he texted me, he goes, if you get on that fucking show, I swear to God, I won't make another piece of content. So, but why do I get to do this? It's because I show up as me online. I'm not a persona. I'm not blowing smoke up anyone's ass. I get out there and I do it. And then I saw you say it, and I said what I say. It wasn't like, so I didn't sit and obsess about it. I was like, all right, I'm just going to say this. And, he's probably never going to see it, whatever. And next thing I know, here I am. Right. And, is it harder, when you're affluent? Maybe. I don't know. I don't know if it matters. I think the journey is worth it anyway.
Dude, I love it. I really appreciate your energy. I really appreciate the vibe. I think that it is a unseen epidemic that a lot of people are dealing with, and being able to do it from a frame that makes you feel proud, to be able to sort of step up to do this, that kind of, in a very British way, admits self-deprecatingly that this is both maybe one of the most difficult challenges and like some sort of weird mortal quest, and also a totally internal battle that no one's ever going to give you any glory for completing. It's sort of this the most boring and magnificent thing that you're ever going to do, both at the same time.
Sure.
A champagne problem that only you are ever really going to be able to pat yourself on the back for, even if it affects the world and the rest of the people around you. I really love it. You mentioned a couple of times, I'm curious before we finish up, you mentioned a few times different books that were really impactful on you. Scott Peck was one of them.
Yep. The Road Less Traveled. Yeah.
If you were to sort of think about, I don't know, a couple of books that you gift the most or that you've reread the most, or the ones that sort of from an accessibility perspective really, really made a big impact on you, what would they be?
First one is Not Nice by Aziz Gaspari. That was really I think that was the first book I ever read that really addressed this kind of people-pleasing behavior and really helped me put a tag on it. Like, oh, I see that. Right. So that book is called Not Nice. The cornerstone text, of course, is going to be Dr. Robert Glover. No more Mr. Nice Guy. Like, Doc, you're the king. You're the king. Shut up about it. And I would say that probably Scott Peck it was one of the number one selling personal growth books of all time, which is the Road Less Traveled. Really a direct punch in the face for making excuses. And, some of the other greats, of course, Mark Manson did a marvelous job with, Subtle Art and, Atomic Habits, and, obviously James Clear and Tim Ferriss and all those guys. But probably those are my top three. Is Not Nice by Gaspari, Glover's No More Mr. Nice Guy, and Scott Peck, I believe, is no longer on the planet. But The Road Less Traveled is probably the book that will change your life the fastest. If you really sit to and just absorb it, it'll break you. And it's one of my favorites. It's one of my favorites. I think where I learned to speak, though, if I can give you one more, my favorite fictional author is Kurt Vonnegut.
Which book?
Slaughterhouse-Five is probably the one that everybody says, but Sirens of Titans is my favorite. I love him as an author. I've read his entire library. Like, whenever I'm in a mood that I don't want to read personal growth, which is starting to happen more and more, as I write a book around this, I'm just kind of burned out on it. I don't want to read any more about how I have to have habits. I don't care. Like, I know I'm going to think positive. It's fine. I'm going to be fine. I think I've probably absorbed 10,000 hours of this shit. So if I don't know by now, I'm not going to know.
Nick Pollard, ladies and gentlemen. Nick, I appreciate the hell out of you. I really love your energy. I love your vibe. I love what you're talking about. Where should people